At the end of 2023, I made it a goal for myself to play more indie titles this last year. I got really bogged down in all the great AAA releases in 2023, and I did not get to experience as many indie titles as I usually aim to. 2024 was another busy year of games, but I still made a point to focus on more indie titles, and at the end time of this recording, I finished 14 of them and wanted to talk about each of them a little bit here today. Now, to be clear, this video will not be a ranking or a top 10 kind of setup. The games will come in no particular order, but I will comment on which one ended up being my favorite. Also, really quick before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to a couple games I played and enjoyed earlier this year but did not get enough time to really digest them yet. Those were Pepper Grinder and Elsie, two fun platformers I have on my Switch that I want to get back into. Alright, let's get rolling. Starting off this list, I figured we could look at a game that was high on my anticipated games list at the beginning of the year. I love platformers, with 3D platformers being my preference, so when I saw Penny's Big Breakaway get revealed at a Nintendo Direct in 2023, I was chomping at the bit. This game gives me a real great first impression with its full of life, full of color presentation, and your character is platforming around using a freaking yo-yo. Now, I did have a bit of a hard time adjusting to the control scheme of said yo-yo, but it ended up making for a different experience. I'm pretty hardwired to want to use the right stick for camera control, especially in 3D platformers, but instead I had to learn the game's unique control set, and I think, while a bit of a tough learning curve for me, it was worth it in the end and made for the gameplay feel that was distinct and very of its own. Collectibles were fun to look for, but most of the replayability really came down to trying to get faster and faster times on each level. This game has really good momentum with the movement, and as you start to learn the levels, you can really get the train rolling and make for a whole new experience as you replay them. Some fun boss fights and some challenging optional levels also add to the variety and help make Penny's Big Breakaway the fun game that it is. While we're talking 3D platformers, let's talk about one of my favorite 3D platformers in recent memory and its DLC that I got this year with Super Kiwi 64. If you haven't heard of Super Kiwi 64, let me sell it to you real quick. It takes clear inspirations from N64 platformers, Banjo being the most obvious in both gameplay and looks. You play as a kiwi bird with a variety of little platforming abilities, including a fun little dash and a great glide, and you basically just explore these sandboxes, getting all the collectibles in each to go to the next level. You can beat the game in like 2 hours, but also the game is like $3 and it's worth every penny. So that's the base game, but in 2024 the DLC was released for it, which is a welcome surprise, and I think you had to shell out a whole extra $1.50 to get it. The DLC brought a couple new levels, which are pretty solid, and I got to have this cool cowboy hat. The funny thing about the DLC is it ties in with some of the creator's other games, with the villain, which at the time of playing I did not understand, so it just seemed like a very random but very funny addition to me. That all being said, if you want a really fun game you can spend an afternoon finishing for less than $5 with DLC included, you can't go wrong with this one. If you like 3D platformers, you'll love it, and if you have a soul at all, you'll love the soundtrack. Let's round out the platformers by talking about the last dedicated platformer on this list with a very good, highly acclaimed Animal Well. Right off the bat, I have to give a shout out to the presentation in this game. This game is called Animal Well, and the wet, dark atmosphere really do be giving off vibes of being in a well. In all seriousness, the luminous colors set against the dark, dank backgrounds really pop. This game is really focused on puzzle solving rather than combat, which I thought was a fresh take on the Metroidvania genre, at least for me and what I've been playing, because it feels like all the big name search action Metroidvanias are getting more and more combat heavy, which is normally my jam, but having to use the old noggin was a good change of pace. Some of these puzzles are spread out over several screens and really make you think outside of all the different abilities you have and how to use them in creative ways. There are also some very well hidden, literal Easter eggs if you want to really dig in and explore. As cool as this game is, when I first played it the very first time, it wasn't sticking and I had considered to not finish it, but I'm glad I gave it that second chance because it clicked, and then I sat there for 6 hours and played through the rest of the game without standing up. Next, I think I want to get into the Zelda likes. We had our platformers, now let's talk the adventure explory games. Starting off with one of my favorite indies, and games in general from this year, Master Key. The first thing you'll notice with this game is its art style. The default is just black and white, no other color. You might think this would make for a not very good looking game, but I actually thought that it really brought out some great sprite work and creative pixel art. But if the black and white just isn't your jam, there are a variety of other color options, still only ever 2 colors at one time, but it can spice it up for a bit if you need it. As far as gameplay goes, this is a full-on top-down Zelda. All the things you would expect to find in a game like that: dungeons, new traversal equipment, sword upgrades, hidden masks which act as the heart pieces as the game hidden throughout, it's all there. However, Master Key really steps things up a notch and expects more from the player. This game is not easy by any means, combat can be a little tough. What I mean is the actual puzzles and hidden secrets really expect a lot out of the player, and I really enjoyed being pushed to think and really explore to progress. I don't remember the last time I played a game like this and was genuinely lost, but like in a good way. For one of the late game secrets, I really wanted to find it, and I even resorted to joining the official Master Key Discord and engaging with the very dedicated community there to figure it out. Really looking forward to see what comes next from Achromi, because I would love a sequel. Now, Master Key is clearly inspired by 2D top-down Zeldas and made for a fantastic entry to the genre. Now let's move to a game that's maybe even more inspired by Zelda, so much so that I'm pretty sure this is just Link's Awakening again in 2024. Castaway is a very cute, very short, two-part Zelda adventure. In the first part, which lasts about 30 to 45 minutes, you are exploring a beachy environment very similar to the Game Boy classic Link's Awakening that it's clearly drawing its inspiration from. Going to little dungeons, fighting bosses, getting upgrades, all in a tight little fun package. But then what makes this game unique is the tower climbing combat challenge that makes that the second half of the game. If you want to think of the first part of the game as almost a tutorial, this tower challenge is where you're being put to the test. Combat is what you'd expect from a top-down Zelda, with the addition of a dodge roll, and using this simple but classic fun moveset, you need to go from floor to floor, killing all enemies, gathering experience points along the way. Each level up you get to choose an upgrade, and the goal is to get to the boss at the top of the 50th floor. This was a neat little challenge that actually took me a few tries. You can and will learn the floor layouts because they do not change between runs, but the level up upgrades are randomized, so you will get different builds each time. The whole experience maybe took me 2 to 3 hours, but it was a fun time. Now, rounding out the Zelda likes is maybe the most creative of the bunch in terms of bringing lots of ideas to the table, even if it wasn't my favorite overall, and that's the Plucky Squire. This is probably the game I am most mixed on from this list, mainly because I had sky-high expectations for this game and it didn't quite make it there. That's not to say it's not a good game, because it is. I think I was just imagining a game that this wasn't ever going to be. Where I think this game is at its best is when you're interacting with the book directly. You are coming in and out of the storybook that you live in the game, and I thought the best ideas were the Baba is you like moments where changing up a word on the page changes the environment in real time to match. The downside to the implementation of these is I feel like the answers were a little too obvious what the game wanted you to pick, where I was hoping the game would let you cut loose a little bit more with some more interesting options to lead to different ways to solve each page. In reality, it was more of an, okay, I see the word I need to get, let me walk over there and do some fun but familiar top-down Zelda-like things over there. Jumping back and forth to 3D and 2D was definitely a neat mechanic, and I think that was one of the game's strong points, as well as the large variety of simple but fun and unexpected mini-games to mix up the pace of the story as you went, and the charming story itself. This game recently got a patch to streamline some of the more hand-holdy tutorial stuff as well, so I think that might make future replays more enticing. I love Souls-likes. In the last couple of years, been feeding me well with non-FromSoft Souls games. Last year, I really enjoyed Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen, and this year brought us Enotria: The Last Song. This game is based on Italian folklore and has some really stunning scenery. The first section of the game is set in a really pretty oceanside town, and the sunlight really makes this area look good. This area in particular highlighted the excellent level design in this game. Lots of interweaving paths and looping around to find shortcuts, optional areas, and loot. As far as the gameplay goes, it plays like a Souls-like. Third-person dodging, light and heavy attacks, lots of weapons, leveling up, tough bosses, but the real key mechanics in this game are the parry system and the mask system. If you liked Sekiro, I think you'll jive with this system. I thought the game was playing best and was the most satisfying when a tough boss had a clear-to-read, rhythmic sequence of attacks when you get a series of parries off. The mask system is a pretty big, important story thing, and it's a neat gameplay mechanic too. Big bosses and enemy types can drop their masks that change your character's appearance and stats, and you can preset 3 different builds with different masks and perks equipped to switch to on the fly in combat. I did not take full advantage of that system a whole lot in my playthrough. I just kind of stuck to the one build I was comfortable with, but it was a really cool idea, and I think it would be fun to work with on a New Game Plus run. I mentioned I love Souls-likes. Well, what do I think about Shoals-likes? I'm glad you asked. Another Crab's Treasure was a game that when I first heard the pitch, I thought it was very silly, but in the best way. I ended up streaming my whole way through this game, and I really enjoyed myself, so much so this game might squeak its way into my top 10 for the year overall. So like Enotria, this game takes a lot of its core inspiration from the FromSoft Souls games. Third person, lock on, light attacks, heavy attacks, dodge, roll, kill bosses, upgrade character. But what sets this game apart is 1, its inclusion of some pretty serious platforming through the grapple hook and the fact that you're mostly underwater so you can kind of glide, swim off of ledges. But 2, the shell system. There are dozens and dozens of different shells you can find around the world to throw on your back, as you are a hermit crab, and these shells have a different block and defense rating, but more interestingly, these different shells are what allow the equivalent to spells or abilities for this game. Lots of cool stuff with tons of variety, always fun ways to take up different enemies if you're getting stuck, including the funniest mechanic of all, just getting yourself a gun to one-shot any enemy or boss you may be stuck with a few clicks in the menu. Not to mention this game is really funny in both the dialogue and the environmental storytelling. I was constantly finding funny things in the background to go look at, lots of puns, but actually pretty well thought out ones and not the ones that I usually make. And I hope this game gets some sort of follow-up in the future because I'll be buying it day one. I managed with a little bit of a collecting goal in the last couple years to get my hands on all of the WarioWare games physically. That series is one I've always enjoyed, but I've grown to love more and more in recent times. Mixed that love of the series for me recently with getting a Steam Deck and realizing that the indie WarioWare called Fishlike was available for me to download and play now with my new Steam Deck for like $3.50, and it makes for a good time for old Zach here. Fishlike is very simply an old school WarioWare game, but with a lot of fish and water themed microgames. Feels like the same level of quality and the same level of quirkiness you would get if you picked up the original GBA WarioWare for the first time. If you're a fan of the series, this is an easy recommend. I will say this game is a little on the tough side. Some games are not so easily picked up on at first glance, in large part because this game uses both mouse and clicky, as well as D-pad and button pushy. So there's an added step in your quick reaction process of figuring out which control scheme you need to use on top of the actual doing the task at hand of the microgame. Like I said, I used a Steam Deck, so I was using touch for all the mouse sections. I think overall that benefited me and made it a little bit easier. But yeah, if you like WarioWare, you're going to like this game, and if you're competitive, there are online leaderboards if you want to fight for those high scores. The next thing I picked up for my Steam Deck after Fishlike was something tonally the exact opposite. I heard from some people online and from some friends that Mouthwashing, an early 3D graphics first-person horror game, was pretty darn good. And I don't want to talk too much about this game because it's best experienced fresh, but to set the table, you're on a space freight ship and there's an incident on the ship, and you live through the follow-on to that event with 4 other people aboard the ship. The game is pretty short, I played through it in one sitting, so if you're down to have a fun little spooky sesh, grab some headphones and give this one a try. It's not super crazy scary, and if you don't like jump scares, I wouldn't worry too much about this one, but I'm just going to leave it there. To force another total whiplash on you, from Mouthwashing to thank goodness you're here. This game is a fun little jaunt through a British town, and you're just a little dude running around helping people getting into trouble. As far as controlling the game, you're basically moving, jumping, slapping, and watching what happens around you. There are tons of super goofy, super British things going on in this game, and I just thought it was super charming. The way it sets up jokes early and allows them to pay off again and again as the game goes was constantly a delight. There were a few times I kind of got lost on what to do next and wandered back and forth to places I didn't need to be, but just getting to see all these goofy little freak characters more was fun in of itself. This is another short one, maybe 3 to 4 hours in the first go-round, but one I think you should definitely give a go if you want to change of pace from your serious high-end graphics action games. This next one I can sell to you real quick. Do you want to run around a little Studio Ghibli world with a fun little jetpack? Okay, well then try Europa. There's even a free demo. In Europa, you're exploring a world that you've been left on, or woken up on, hard to say, and you're basically following the breadcrumbs left by your father on what happened here and what your story is. This is all done through some pretty light puzzle solving and some basic platforming, but really what this game is selling to you is the vibes. Jumping and soaring around these painterly areas with my little air backpack, chaining together recharges with a blast, and the free flow of the movement made getting around fun and engaging, even if the required platforming was often a little basic. Getting a good sense of momentum through some of the larger areas and just letting yourself look around was very relaxing, and the story along the way manages to have some moments that are mysterious and heartwarming, even if it wasn't always an award-winning narrative. The Steamworld games are my jam. I've played all of them, other than Quest, which I have downloaded and intend to play, and Steamworld Heist is one of my favorite indies from a few years back. These games are basically turn-based cover shooter RPGs. You have different weapon classes that interact with the environment and the obstacles around them in different ways, and you try and eliminate the other bots on the map around you while collecting treasure. My favorite weapon type in these games are the long-range sniper weapons that you can line up shots to bounce off of 1, 2, 3, 4, however many walls until it hits an enemy in the noggin. Heist 2 has a job system where it's easy to switch class types between the characters and unlock skills from each class to build up a cool new character with a mix of skills that fits your playstyle or the situation in front of you. I also really enjoyed exploring the overworld map and building out my submarine. I won 100% of this game, doing all the missions and side missions and sub-missions inside of each of them, and I hope and assume we get a Heist 3 one day, but I think it's time for a Steamworld Dig 3, and I'm ready. I decided to talk about Balatro last, because even though it's my favorite indie of the year, and damn near my favorite game overall this year if Final Fantasy VII Rebirth didn't exist, but you have almost certainly come across this game by this point if you're someone who's cared enough to watch this far into an indie games video. Balatro is Balatro, it's everywhere. It's all over Twitter, people stream this game like crazy, it's won tons of awards, it's just incredible. When I first picked up Balatro, I could not put it down. I was playing while watching TV, I was playing in the car, I was playing late at night in bed, and then first thing when I woke up with the Switch still laying next to me. This game really clicks for me. I've mentioned on several occasions that number go big makes my brain happy, and this game makes number go big in such a satisfying way. Building your deck and working to play certain hands was a fun mix-up to keep each round interesting, and I love that while you don't have to know a thing about poker to pick up this game, after all my time with it, I think I could reasonably sit down at a poker table and at least understand what's going on. This is a game that will no doubt stick with me for the longest to come on this list, and honestly probably more than anything else that came out this year or in recent years. It's so infinitely replayable and pick up and playable. One of these days, I am sure there'll be a content update for the game, and when there is, you know I'm going to be there wasting away, making number go big once more. Thanks for watching. I'm pretty happy with the games I got around to trying this year on the indie front. Lots of cool ideas and several great twists on genres I love with a little indie flair out of this bunch of games. I did not get to all the games I wanted to. In the next couple months, I really want to try to find time to play 9 Souls and UFO 50 as well. Those have both been on my radar since their launches, but I did not find time to play them just yet. Hopefully I can talk to those in a future video soon, but that all being said, I would love to hear some more indie recommendations in the comments below. Within the last month, I did get that Steam Deck, so I'm looking forward to really getting to try the weird, obscure indie titles going forward. If you liked this video, it would mean a lot if you'd help me out, and if you could leave a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more in the future. I talk indie games, retro games, modern games, the whole gambit. And thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.